bar.
I know.
Hi, everybody. You're going to let everyone make sure they make it in. I know I started just a moment late. And then once we are all settled in, we'll go ahead and get started. All right. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to our Central Command webinar. We've got a summer series that we're kicking off today. This webinar is being recorded, and today's topic is going to be travel transaction access. So Michael's going to be going through these next few series of our videos and covering the screens and processes around our topics and being able to provide kind of a video help file. So to amplify the help files that you can access within Central Command already. Today, we're going to do our presentation like we normally do, and we will be answering any questions that you guys have towards the end of the presentation. So if you have those questions, go ahead and drop them off in the Q&A tab or in the chat box. I'll be watching, making sure that we note so that Michael can answer those at the end of his presentation. I believe there's even an ability to ask anonymously if you prefer that. Again, this webinar is being recorded. We're going to make sure that you guys get the link right after the video has wrapped up and processed. We'll also be posting to our YouTube channel so that you can access and send out to any of your colleagues that might have missed some of the really good information we're going to be hearing. Everyone is muted, cameras are turned off, so no worries about having to manage any of that. You can just sit back and enjoy, and of course, ask your questions in the chat box. We like to keep Michael on his toes. And we also want to make sure that we're answering those questions for you. As far as upcoming webinars to be aware of, this is, again, the first of 3 video help files that we're going to be doing this summer. The next one in June is going to be focused on validation rules, so how to set up and manage those within the system. And then in July, we're bringing Danny back to the webinars to do some information around web APIs that are available within Central Command, since that's become a hot topic of late. So these are all going to be on Thursdays, 11:30 a.m. Eastern time in the US. So hopefully we're still helping span across all the time zones that are represented by you guys and accommodating that. And again, register for these, have your colleagues register for these, and then they can get the recording right after the session is done and be able to play that back. So I'm going to hand it over to Michael, Director of Product Management here at ServeVita, to talk about travel transaction access.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I am Michael Guiette, Director of Product Management with ServeVita. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the upgrades. When we are upgrading to Central Command Milestone 7.76 or higher, a number of things have come to our attention, and we want to talk about and focus on the access to the new tools. How do you get to make sure that the people who are in our environments are actually getting the benefits of our upgrades? What I'm going to do is I'm going to my screen, and I'm actually going to be talking both about the desktop environment and the web environment, because when we look at them, what we'll notice is that our goal would be to make sure that everybody does transition to using the web screens, but we know that part of the difference is that the web screens look a little different, they act a little different, but we want to make sure that you are familiar with how do we make sure that our teams are getting the benefits. So what I'm going to do here, first and foremost, is I'm going to log in as an administrator, super user. The reason why I'm going to do this is most of our customers today are using the desktop application. When you go into the Central Command menu under the desktop application and you go into the transaction folder, some examples, hold on one minute. So Make sure I'm looking at the right one. Some examples of the application when you're
Oh,
looking at
Michael,
it,
you're
ma'am.
not sharing your screen yet.
I'm not.
You're not.
Oh, oh, hold on. Where's my?
First question. Can we see Michael's screen?
Oh, of course. Let me go here. It says I'm sharing. Hold on. Share. And I want to share this screen. There. Now should you be able to see my screen? Yes, everyone? Everyone?
Okay,
Did
I've stopped presenting. Sorry, everyone, for the little technical difficulties. Yeah, Chris is saying that we don't. Can you try sharing again, Michael?
I'm trying again.
I just stopped sharing as a presenter, so maybe that also will help.
Maybe that. Okay. Try again later. Oh, it's weird. I got an error that says we couldn't authenticate you due to a device or network Teams experienced technical difficulties. So mine is saying Teams is experiencing a technical difficulty here. I've never seen that before. Let's try this again. I'm going to, Bailey, give me a second. I'm going to leave. I'm going to come right back.
Okay, I have you as a presenter, so you should be able to. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. I'm just working on fixing little technical difficulties with screen share.
Bailey, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. It doesn't look like
Okay.
you left and came back in, but can you share your screen now?
Yeah, hold on. I think I know what my problem is here. It is I was connected. I'm in the office today, so I was connected to the VPN and my issue was that it wasn't allowing me to, there we go. I'm getting close. Okay, let's try and share the screen now.
There we go.
See Central Command. Okay. Sorry about that. And that was user error, not technical error. I'm in the office today, so I connected to the VPN and it didn't like the dual connection. So when we look at the Central Command upgrade, you will notice that if you're in the desktop application, you will come into the transaction screen. Let's go down here to inquiry. Let's go into fixed registers for a moment. When you log into this screen and you look at fixed registers, what you're going to see here is duplicates of each one of these fixed registers. You're going to see agent twice. You're going to see GDS agent twice. The problem is, it's not a problem. The reason why you're seeing those twice is because the screens that are in the application have been redesigned for publishing on the web. Now, the difference between the web functionality and the desktop functionality is that when the web functionality, especially on these screens, you don't have that ability to do some copy and pasting. So in the desktop application, we can, when we talk about what we're doing with regards to being able to come in here and open a screen, we want to be able to see the traditional desktop screen that we're looking for. We don't want to see the web screen in the desktop. Same thing here goes for the functionality. If I go into my transaction inquiry and I load data here, the problem, or not the problem, if I double click on this, let me see where I am. I am looking at my MG1, which is should be accessible there. So the problem is that when you're used to going into this transaction inquiry, you're used to going in and just double clicking on the transaction screen and seeing the transaction pop up in front of you. Now, the difference is the one that you see today when you double click on this row is the old transaction screen. It's not taking advantage of the new upgraded functionality. So when I click over and I go into a different user, for example, and I go into that transaction screen, transaction inquiry, what happens here is instead of being able to enter that, instead of being able to just double click on this screen, you'll see that I've set it up so I'm not authorized to use the functionality to double click on the row and get to the transaction screen. What I want to do instead is I want to pick the transaction that I'm looking for, and I have a link up here at the top. The link for the ticket vendor screen now is going to open the new screen to give me access to all of that new upgraded functionality. What I mean by that is here on this screen, if there was more than one passenger on this transaction, I would see all of the passengers listed in the P&R. When I go to the invoice items, I want to be able to see not only the invoice item here, but I want to have access to all of the tools that are available on that invoice item. So by doing this, excuse me, by doing this, it allows me to go in and make sure that my users are getting the benefit of the upgrade. So when you look at this screen, and if I go over to my web login, and let me log into the web. So when I log into the web and I go to Central Command and I go into the transaction inquiry print invoice. Oh, I should have put a date in there. I apologize. It's going to take a minute to load this up. This screen, when I zoom into the transaction screen from the transaction inquiry print invoice, this screen is going to look exactly like the one I selected for my users to be able to access. So our goal here then is that let me just jump in here real quick. I got to look at one other thing I need to have up here on my screen so I can see this. So what we're going to do is, so here, if I click on the zoom button, so this transaction inquiry print invoice screen, if I click on the zoom button, it will take me into that transaction and give me the same view of the transaction that I want my users in the web to be able to access. So in this screen, like I had before, I've got all of the passenger names down here. If I look at the invoice items, I want to be able to show the invoice items with the tools on the new screen to be able to access that. If I have an exchange, I want to be able to see the new exchange screen rather than having the tab out there that says manual exchange. So I want the users to have and take advantage of the ability to use this. Now we're going to get into this screen in a little more detail in just a moment, but I want to also point out something else on the menu. If I'm using the web, if you've got users who are logging into the web and they go into system administration, go into access control, this is where we're going to be setting up what users have access to the functionality within the Unit 4 Business World application, as well as the desktop. But if I'm doing this from the web, I'm only managing the functionality and access control of the web module. I can't do both the desktop and the web from the web system administration menu access field. Okay, to do it in the desktop, I have to go back to the desktop to do that. Okay, so the first thing that we have that we want to talk about is we want to talk about user permissions. When you are upgrading from a previous version to the latest version. We got a lot of customers on 7.5 right now. Some of that been upgraded to 7.6 update 1. We released a hot fix yesterday of 7.6 update 1, and then 7.7 is scheduled to come out at the end of this month from Unit 4. So we'll keep you advised of that. You'll be getting announcements of that in the future. But I want to talk about the permissions. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go over to the settings module. We're going to go into, sorry, that keeps popping up. We're going to go into the system administration. We'll go into users and access, and we're going to go into menu-based access. Now, menu-based access, at the top of this screen, you're going to see that this is what we control on the desktop application, the web application. We're not going to talk about web services today because this is more about the functionality within Central Command. And then we have the reports menu. We'll talk about this reports menu because it does affect how we can send information or browsers that we've created in the desktop. We want to be able to publish them to the web. So we'll be able to do that. We'll show you what that means. So in the desktop application, when we go into Central Command and we go into that transactions folder, and let's go down to that fixed registers that I was talking about before. So the fixed registers are duplicated in this permissions menu. The top one is always related to the old traditional fixed register screen. What I mean by that is if I have the old screen and the new screen, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take the new screen here and I'm going to put it back in my menu. Okay, I'm going to save that. I'm going to apply it. When I close this, it'll refresh my menu. So when I come back over to my, oh, yes, when I come back over to my ST client, my US client in this case, I'm going to go into fixed registers. Now you see I've got the old agent screen and the new agent screen. Here's the difference. If I open the old agent screen, it looks like the same old agent screen we have. We can insert a bunch of rows here. We can copy and paste into the screen as we have all of our lives with Central Command. If I go into the new screen, this new screen is a way to create an agent. This is one at a time. It's designed to be published on the web. And so the functionality here is different. That's why I'm suggesting that when you log in to or upgrade to the latest release of Central Command, that we manage the permissions that we need accordingly. Because it's going to be important that when you have your traditional desktop users, you want to make sure that one, they don't get confused by which screen to look at, and two, that you maintain the functionality in the desktop the way they expect it to work. You don't want to have somebody after our upgrade to come back in and say, wait a minute, I can't do this because it doesn't work the same. So our goal is to be able to maintain and look at the functionality. Now, all of that being said, there are going to be times when for a user, the functionality is going to be different, and we want them to be using the new functionality. The case in point is the transaction screen. So if we go into, again, if we come back over to our settings module and we go into system administration, we go into users and access, back to menu-based access, to make sure that our users in the desktop application are using that new transaction screen. We have to do some setup when we upgrade. Again, we do this first during our testing of the application to make sure our users get used to using this new functionality. So in the past, if you went into this header inquiry and you open this up, underneath that transaction header inquiry, you see that we have the zoom to the old ticket vendor screen. This is where we want to remove that. We don't want them to be able to double click on that row and get to the old screen and continue on using old or unupgraded functionality. So my suggestion is we turn the zoom to the ticket vendor screen off. In the menu, if I come down here, it's under the transaction inquiry as well. It's not under the transaction print screen. The reason why is because if we get people to use that, which is the preferred, obviously, but there's a zoom button on that screen, and the zoom button takes them to that new screen. So anywhere we have this, in this case, the ticket, this is the old ticket vendor screen. This is the new ticket vendor screen. So again, because we don't want them to be able to access the old screen, we want to take away the access from that screen. Okay. Same thing with our car and hotel booking screen. It isn't necessary anymore in the desktop app because you can do all of that functionality, all of that itinerary only functionality in the new screen. Same thing with forced refund. We can do a forced refund in the new screen. We don't have to have a completely separate screen to do that. So it really is about looking at how far do you want to go to take advantage of the upgraded functionality within Central Command. And so by using this, we then get our teams, not to be confused with teams, but to get our employees on our travel team accessing the new functionality and taking the advantage of that. So once we've set up the access, once we go in, and in this case, I'm going to go ahead and say okay there. I'm going to refresh my menu. Or I can just come back over here. I'm going to go into I'm going to close all these windows. I'm going to refresh my menu. So now what you're going to see when when I go into Central Command under the transactions folder, if I look at the transaction inquiry, this is where I have reset my ability to access information, so I cannot double click on that row. I've turned off the functionality to the old transaction screen. But what I have done is I've brought the transaction number over to my main column here. And so now when I highlight that transaction in my tools at the top of the screen, now I have a link to the ticket vendor, so I can go in and open that transaction screen. Now, as I said before, the transaction screen is the same on the web as it is in the desktop application. So when we look at this transaction screen, there are going to be some noticeable differences when you see that. In the past, when we looked at the old transaction screen, at the bottom of the screen, it only had the first main passenger. If there are multiple passengers on that transaction, all of your passengers will be listed here. In the transaction header, you still have the same information. You've got the transaction date, the IATA number, customer ID, and PNR record locator. You have the same agent information. Down here at the bottom, though, we've got another button, a drop down, that gives us other data that's stored within that transaction header table within Central Command. You're going to see this other data box throughout these other screens as well, because what we can display on the screen is different than what's in the entire table. So what that other data is our ability to get to other data within that transaction. Let me give you that example on the invoice items screen. So in the invoice items screen, if you're looking at the invoice item down here at the bottom, right? Go down here, scroll down, you're going to see other data, right? When we click on other data, this gives us access to that other data that is in that transaction. So we can see all of the information that we brought into that document table with regards to the transaction. You can see all of that information here and be able to use it, be able to see who the last user was, the last update date, all of those things that we would normally have to go in and build a browser for and pull it up and be able to report on it. We can now see it within this screen. Another piece of information that you'll see here, you can see now we've got the display. We've got different functionality on each one of these screens. So remember I mentioned forced refund. If we come in here and we want to create a forced refund of a transaction, we do this from the same new transaction screen. The screen is designed a little differently as well. So when you're looking at the invoice items, you're going to see the grid at the top, just like you have in the past. Underneath that grid, though, you're going to see additional boxes here. Okay, so in the past, where we've had, the ability to void a single invoice item was up here in this tools menu, or it's in the tools menu up here at the top. What we've done here is we've brought it down and we've added those boxes here. If I click new, for example, and I add a new invoice item to this transaction, in the past, you can see where it's got ANVX here, which is blank. Okay, the reason why it's blank on this new transaction or this new invoice item is because I don't know whether or not this is going to be an airline ticket. I don't know if it's a vendor transaction or a low cost carrier ticket. So it's waiting to fill that in to determine what information I'm going to put into this invoice item to determine whether or not it is a new transaction or an old transaction. I'm going to copy this field and I'm going to come back in here and I'm going to put this ticket number in there. I'm not going to use the vendor ID. I'm going to put in the carrier code UA, United Airlines. Again, this is type ahead. This is new functionality. And when I tab off of that, now you can see it allows me to add that new ARC airline ticket into this transaction screen. In the past, in the old screen, you can't do that. Anytime you add a row to the invoice items tab, it gives you only the ability to add a vendor transaction. So this functionality is new. The ability for you to add any type of invoice for any type of segment. Now, when I've tabbed into this screen, then you'll be able to, once this is filled out and you've got the information populated as you need to. So here, if it was a conjunctive ticket, I can put my conjunctive ticket number in here. If it was a non-ARC carrier, like this other one was up here, if I change the vendor number and I put in the same vendor number to 210769, exactly the same. When I tab off of that field, now notice it changed it to an N here, makes it a low cost air carrier invoice item. So the system, the screen does give you that ability to put in additional invoice items within this transaction screen. Same thing if I'm looking at this and when I get to this and I add my air segments for that. So if I add itinerary segments, when I add those itinerary segments, I want to be able to have the ability to link the air segments, the supplier segments, back to that invoice item. That's where this associated box comes in. So if I go into my itinerary tab, for example, and here, let me do this real quick to see if it's going to, hold on, let me open that. Yes, I'm not going to save that because I'm going to come back here and I'm going to reopen that. And I'm going to go into my itinerary tab. And why isn't my, it never fails that you can see that I've got one auxiliary segment here. This is a preferred seating charge. So it gives me the details of that here. And what this does is it allows me then, yeah, it's not showing me my top box here. I apologize. Live demos always do weird things. So your grid will be displayed here. It will show you all of your airline segments. When it doesn't, typically the first time you may have to come in here and reset that to the default layout and save it. and it will, by closing that and reopening it, it should redisplay those segments. It doesn't happen every time. Occasionally it does, though. So when that happens and you select it to link the air segment or the itinerary segment to an accounting line, you would tag it in your itinerary grid. You would then come here and say link it. I want to link it back, and it'll show you your list of invoice items to be able to link those to. So that is there. Your remarks tab is the same, okay, as before. You have the ability to see all of the remarks on that P&R. The addresses, again, the same. It gives you the agency address, the delivery address, history. If I save something or change something on that, I would, if it's an invoice item, I would see the change to the invoice item. If it was a remark item, I would see the change to the remark. The action overview tab. This is a little different. We haven't had this before. Action overview means that if I'm doing something for this traveler, I'm doing a waiver, I'm helping them get an upgrade or a preferred seat, I can click memo here, and this allows me to, as part of that transaction, when I save that, now as part of this transaction within the action overview, it will show that memo that I've created. So anybody could come in here and say, if you've got account managers and we've done waivers and favors, when you go into that transaction for that traveler's trip, you can put in here a memo that says, we went over and above what the traveler was looking for. We helped them do something over and above. So we can do a memo. We can add a task here that would show up down here on another user's task list. So I can assign, if in this case, in our environment, I could assign Danny a task to do something in this transaction for this traveler, and it would show up there as that I've assigned it to him, and when he's finished it, he would mark the status as finished, put his notes in there, and we would have a record of all of that. The info tab. The info tab gives us information about this transaction. When was it last updated? Who did it last? Who did the update? The last updated table name. So we could see here that it was the document table that was last updated. Something was changed on that. So it allows us to be able to see information about that. This is a user-defined table link so that we can go in and click on something. We want to pull up a transaction ID. It links us back to that table, the ticket table. We really don't need that because we do have that other data available to us. Now, one other thing I do want to come back and point out here on the invoice items tab. When we look at the invoice items tab and we have all of this information, if we have remarks associated with that transaction against the invoice item, so if you have invoice item remarks on that P&R, these would be displayed based on the tab. These are the whole travel remarks. These are the invoice items remarks that are associated with that passenger and invoice item. So that's where those would be defined. If we have any UDID mapping going on, this tells us we mapped data from the remarks table into the TUD P&R data table. So in this case, we're mapping something into our varchar 51 field, and this is the value that we put in it. So when we're doing our remark mapping, we can make sure that the data, we can report on this and make sure that the data got mapped correctly based on our UNID 51 remark that was in that P&R. So it allows us to see that. And then any historical changes. This is invoice history. We can see what the history was rather than going up to this tab, which would show us all of the history on all of the invoices. This is specific history to this invoice item. Okay. Now, the other thing I do want to point out is if I come back over to my inquiry screen, and let me just see if I've got wanted to look to see here. Give me 1 second, because what I want to find here is I want to find the exchange field. Okay, so one. Probably gone too far. Give me exchange. I can do. Let's do this and just do this real quick. See what, okay. That didn't do what I wanted to do. I thought I had my exchange field in here. The reason why I'm looking for an exchange here is because exchanges is another area that is, it has been updated in that transaction screen. And so the field there it is. Okay, so the reason why I want to pull up an exchange ticket using the new ticket vendor screen is to be able to show you, I didn't grab the right value there. So I'm actually have to highlight the transaction ID that I want to open, and then I can pull that in using that link. So when I look at the invoice items on an exchange, the advantage of using this new screen is to be able to see the data that came in or that is exchanged on that invoice items tab. So here I'm looking at the invoice items tab at the top. And when I highlight that ticket, I'm going to see all of the details of the exchange without going over and trying to figure out that cryptive manual exchange tab. All of the information is going to be displayed here. In this case, this exchange didn't have the original transaction within Central Command. So these values are zero. So it gives me the original ticket number, but I don't have a link. Let me see if I've got one where I do have that link here. Give me 1 second. And we'll find one here. Good. So this transaction, what I've got is I've got an exchange ticket These original values in the old screen, those original values were a calculated value that happened when the GDS sent us the new ticket price and the exchange amounts only. When that happened, what Central Command did on the old screen was it took this minus this and it populated this. Today, with this new screen, when we have that original ticket in the system, we populate the original values here. Notice they are not modifiable, okay? What we're doing is we're pulling that data where we have that link between the original ticket, and this is how we know we have that link. We have the original ticket data. We're pulling in the original ticket amounts from that transaction. So if I open this transaction, and I display them side by side. Okay, so now this is the original transaction on the right. You can see the status is X. It means it has been exchanged for something else. This is the values of that original transaction. So we scroll down, we can see that these original values are going to match the original values that are on that original ticket. It's not a calculated value anymore on this exchange screen, which gives us that ability to make sure that when we do the BSP reconciliation, the ARC reconciliation, because we're getting the new ticket information and the exchange ticket information directly from the GDS, we should see more accurate information. We don't have to worry about whether or not some type of weird calculation happened here and trying to figure it out. Okay, so that's the advantage of using this new screen as well. If you scroll down to the taxes section, okay, the taxes section down here, the tax amounts are going to match the original tax amounts. So again, not modifiable. If we do a modification, then what we're going to see is if there's a different. Now, what you can see here, I've got a difference between the original tax here and the new tax here. The exchange tax amount has been left as 0 because we did not force it as a calculation. Because if we did, if we force this calculation, then it's going to change what's up here in the total tax amount. Okay.
So, Michael, can I jump in with some of the Q&As about, we've got one that's specific about the changes between an exchange and an original.
Yes.
Okay. So first question, I'm going to get to all of them in the chat here, but let's start here while we're already on exchanges. We have a question about what happens if there was a residual MCO amount added to the base ticket on a previous exchange. How would the system know to reduce the old ticket base fare by the MCO amount on the subsequent exchange?
So if we have let me think about this for a second. So we have an MCO that we are exchanging in the new ticket, right? And so what we would see is that you have essentially, and I think I'm right. If we had, I'd like to be able to I don't have an example of that. My thought is if we are exchanging let me see if I can rephrase the question and tell me if this is what you're asking.
Yeah, clarifying exchanging the actual old ticket.
Yeah.
If we added a residual MCO amount to the base ticket on a previous exchange, how does it know to carry that forward, I guess, is the question.
So okay, so you have a residual MCO that you're exchanging for the new ticket, right? And that will leave you a balance. Is that what I'm hearing? And then with that balance, you're going to pay that balance with some other form of payment. Is that a correct statement?
No, I think this is they have a residual MCO amount that they're adding to the base ticket. They're not exchanging the ticket with the MCO. They're adding that residual MCO amount onto the base ticket.
I would like to see what it is. I can't
Okay,
answer
we
that.
might have to go into that. We might have to take that one
Let's take that one
offline.
offline.
Okay. Another question is going to the web version. When you were
Yes.
in the transaction inquiry print invoice screen.
Yes.
How do we change the defaults on that screen so that the begin dates and the lookup are not pre-populated?
Excellent question.
I know those dates they've tripped up many a user.
Yep. And so if you go into this, I'm in the web now, I'm looking at it, you'll see that mine are blank. Okay. The reason why mine are blank is because when I went into this screen, I went up to Windows options here. Okay. Windows options on this screen can be used here or in the desktop application. When I click on that Windows options screen, it'll default to the window that I opened it from. And I'm going down here to the main tab. I'm going into selection criteria, dates, and I've got the date from set as 01/01/1900. The reason why I'm
you're older
putting,
than we thought.
pardon me?
You must be older than we thought.
I actually I had no begin date, right? I am eternal. So what this means is in SQL language, 01/01/1900 equals blank. Okay. But I want to change this right now. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change this to $today -7. Okay. And I'm going to apply that. Once I've applied that, okay, I'm going to save it. It's going to say, okay, you've saved it. Woohoo. But if I need to give this version of this, I have to go into Windows option distribution, and I'm going to define which group of users or single user gets that new version of the screen. So you can have multiple versions of that screen, and multiple groups or people could have their own view of it. What's the start date that they want to use, right? So now if I come back over here to transaction inquiry print invoice, and I go back into it, oh, hold on, let me refresh it. Let me just do a reload, central command. I didn't do the thing. Hold on. And so let's go Windows option distribution, and that's that. And I'm going to save that. And I'm going to refresh it again. So notice what I did there on the web. Oh, dang it.
I think when I don't think you had distributed it when you had changed it in the.
Let me go ahead and just close that real quick and go back into my here.
And while you're doing that, I'll just answer another question that's here. Someone asked, if ServeVita is doing the upgrade, is there a list of reminders you'll tell clients to do, like removing access to the old ticket vendor screen? It'd be really helpful to have a list to remember when we do the upgrade. And the answer is yes. Michael is working as we've learned some of these things around, especially the newer releases. We're working on making sure that our upgrade sheets for our functional and for our technical consultants are updated to help guide you guys through that process, and make some of these things easy and a part of your upgrade to take advantage of it.
And that's why, because I didn't save it. So I applied it, but I didn't save it. So there I'm going to apply that change. I'm going to save that change here. And then when I refresh that screen, it's, you know, live environments, they do the weirdest things for you sometimes. I didn't take it. Oh. And that is that. And so it does say that I have saved it. I'm just going to go back in and see if it's saved again here. Okay. Refresh. Central Command, transaction, query, printed invoice. There we go.
It is.
So it's the save button. Always remember the save button. So what we've done here is, because now depending on, then this is a really good thing to think about, because if you make them blank, and a lot of times where we will do that, we'll make them blank, is down here in our corrections, error messages. What we want to see is, I want to see this blank because I want to see any and all error messages that I have here. Okay, so I would prefer to see this blank, or I would prefer to see my fatal messages as blank. That way, whenever somebody comes in and they're working fatal messages, they can see everything that is sitting here. Okay, so be aware of that. So that, and again, you can set the Windows option distribution both up in the desktop application as well as the web application. Great question. So I know we were about to go over time. Bailey, do you have any other questions? Are that I can go through, that I can answer? I got lost in my time here today. I apologize for that.
All good. We do have another question. I'm going back to the exchanges with residuals, but I think we will, I think need to put together maybe some resources or maybe schedule some focus on how exchanges are working in Central Command to better answer those questions about how an exchange and residuals are handled by the system. So as far as finishing the focus of travel transaction access here on time. I know we're coming up right on the hour, so we just want to thank everybody for coming. Again, we'll work on making sure the recording is out and then be ready for June's webinar topic of validation rules. And like I said, we'll work on getting some resources and some answers about those exchanges out through our newsletter and maybe through a session of its own.
And we will take the questions and publish answers to the questions that have come in. So
yeah. So thank you, everybody, and have a good rest of your day.